Okay. Hello, friends. Sorry about being late today. We are having some technical problem with my PowerPoint. But anyways, those are all resolved. Hopefully, most of you are still here, and we are definitely going to have this webinar. We'll finish on time as well at 2 p.m. Eastern or 11 a.m. Pacific time. We are going to repeat one of the topics which I did a few weeks ago, almost more than a month ago. It's because a lot of people requested that I should do it again. There were a lot of questions around test-driven development and a lot of questions about acceptance test-driven development. So I have decided to just go over that session one more time so that things are clear and you'll all get all your answers, all your questions answered this time. So can somebody confirm that they're able to see my screen, the slideshow? It says agenda for 25th October. Just say yes in the chat box or questions box. Awesome. Great. All right. So we'll start with the flashcard as we did last time. Okay, hold on. Thank you. Okay, just 1 second. I'm having a problem with the slideshow again. Okay, give me 1 minute. I have to open my PowerPoint again. Okay, let's try it one more time. I'm sorry it is not going as smoothly as I thought. So 3 agenda items today. We're going to talk about flashcard, about osmotic communication. The second one, test-driven development. And the third one is acceptance test-driven development, or ACDD. Okay, and if we have time, we'll go over some of the sample questions towards the end. Okay, we are running about 15 minutes late today. Sorry about that. Right. Osmotic communication. So by definition, it is a form of communication with low cost of communication, but comes with very high feedback rate. I don't want you to get distracted by this graph here for now. An example of an osmotic communication is, let's say, if you're sitting in a meeting and your part in that meeting is just for 5 minutes, or you are required in that meeting just for 5 minutes, but that meeting is 60 minutes long. So I'm sure we have all gone through that kind of a situation. However, if you come to think of it, those 5 minutes when you're needed in that meeting, they can be very crucial because you may be required to answer some questions that are useful for making some critical decisions. And if you are not present there at that time, there would be a high cost of tracking you down and making you explain the context and trying to get that question answered and distributing that information to the whole group who pertains to that context. So what you are doing as an individual is that you are sitting in that meeting, you're doing your own work on your laptop, but you're kind of listening osmotically, and you are present at the time when you need it. Okay, so they can make a decision. So this is an example of an osmotic communication, and it is very, very useful if you attach a cost to it. Another example of osmotic communication is that you are in your work area and you overhear somebody else doing some design discussion, and there is a part of the discussion that pertains to your expertise, and they are able to spot you there, and they ask you a quick question. Okay, that is another example of osmotic communication. So usually this kind of communication is very it has a low cost and it has a very high and rich feedback rate, which is very useful. And it is one of the things that Agile as a community understands communication by itself is a very big, it's a very big thing in Agile. It's the backbone of everything, of every success of any Agile project. And osmotic communication is a form of communication that is very well accepted. So next time you're called to a meeting where you think that you're not really needed, uh, you don't have to frown. You may be needed for a little bit, where they are able to make a decision, and which could be very critical. Okay. So again, I'll just reiterate the advantages. Okay, it has a rich and rapid feedback. Okay, a group is able to make informed decision making rather than making assumptions or trying to hunt down the people who are experts. And the third is this active knowledge sharing. Okay, so even though you're sitting in that, so I'll come back to the same example. If you're sitting in that 60-minute meeting, I'm sure even things that don't really pertain to you directly, there will be a lot of knowledge sharing that will happen in that session. So in the end, you may come out more knowledgeable. Okay, the the graph that I'm showing on the right hand side here, a lot of you may have seen this graph many times already. So this on the x-axis, you can see it's the richness of communication channel. On the y-axis is the communication effectiveness. So for modeling options could be a lot of things. Okay, whether it is analysis, designing at the functional level, designing at the workflow level, designing at the programming level, uh, designing at the test level. So all these things, they fall under the modeling options. So face to face on whiteboard is the most effective and richest form of communication. So anytime if you're in a co-located kind of a workshop, and you have to do some kind of a designing discussion, please make sure you are doing it face to face on a whiteboard. I have seen teams, they try to do design discussions on chat softwares, Skype chat, or trying to do it over emailing. It is a very bad idea. You can see that. Okay, email conversation for modeling options is at the bottom. Okay, it is not very effective, not very rich. So you want to be at the top here on the right hand side. Also for documentation options, um, videotapes, they are the best, most effective. Paper is the worst. So in general, that's about osmotic communication. Let's segue into test driven development right away. I will be taking questions shortly. If you have any questions, feel free to keep asking them in your questions box. And even though I'm not able to answer it right away, I will come to it. Okay. So next big topic is test driven development. Okay. We'll talk about test driven development first, and then acceptance test driven development. So um, it's a simple three-step cycle. First of all, I mean, test-driven development is a very big, uh, a very big movement in Agile. Okay, those of you who are new to Agile, those of you who are aspiring to be Scrum Masters or facilitators or Agile coaches, etc., and even those of you who are coming from a technical development background, engineering background, who are doing hands-on coding right now, it's it's one of the very very strong processes or strong habits or practice in Agile. Okay, you have to pick this up. How does it work? At first, you see this red circle. You are writing failing test cases first. What does it mean? So I get this question a lot. What does a failing test case mean? I work in EAI or J2E technologies. I write a lot of Java code. Every technology that an enterprise level software uses, most of the enterprise level technologies, they ship with unit test case uh, builder or use unit test case software. Like J2E has JUnits. Okay, so I write a lot of test cases using JUnits. It's at the code level, it's at the unit level. However, when I'm given a story to implement, I just don't go start writing the implementation right away. What I do first is I identify the interfaces. I try to write the JUnits for that functionality first. So I have understood the story. I have understood at the low level how I'm trying to think of how at the low level I'm trying to design um, trying to design a class design or an interface design. When I start writing JUnits, that design becomes more and more clear to me because I understand what is the use case or what is the motivation of the calling class. So I'm able to understand what interface I need to implement, what are the methods that interface is supposed to have, what are the parameters I'm going to pass to that methods. Once I've done that, I have written some minimal code. Okay, so I have created that interface, I have created that method with those parameters. I have not implemented the body yet. I have not implemented the meat of the code yet. At this point in time, I have written many JUnits, so many scenarios or many cases that I would pound my application with. Um, Now I'm at a point I have failing JUnits. So I'm at this red point. Following this, I come to this green circle here, which is to make the code work. At this point, you can imagine as a developer, there is a huge motivation I have because I understand where my code is going to fit in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things. This makes me feel very motivated. Also, I have not missed that step of creating a class design or creating or thinking about the class design or interface design. So there's a huge benefit, a huge benefit in this red circle here when you're writing failing test cases. And the quality that you will get after writing the meat of the work in this green circle, when you're writing the meat of the code, when you're writing business logic to make those test cases pass one by one. I may have written, let's say, 10 test cases for a story, JUnits or unit test cases. I would be, I there is a good chance that I have almost 100% coverage of the cases. There's a good chance that I have not missed out any detail about the clarity on the story, or I have not missed out any of the edge cases or fringe cases or negative test cases. So at this point, I write the meat of the code. And once I have finished doing that, there's a kind of a review that goes on. So refactoring is another big thing in Agile. In XP, we have learned about continuous refactoring or opportunistic refactoring, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. The only point that I'm trying to make here in the refactoring purple circle is that you want to eliminate any redundancy. At the end of the story, when you have finished the implementation, you can still remove any of the redundancies or make sure that you're following the correct coding standards, or you can make certain things better. Maybe you can improve the algorithm, okay, or maybe you can rename the variables or the method names or the interfaces better, or you can organize those classes or interfaces better in your whole package, the way your code is getting bundled. So there could be a refactoring exercise that may be needed. And it goes in circle. So if your refactoring exercise becomes pretty big, you may have to write some more unit test cases, which may fail at first, and then you'll implement some more code, meat of the code or business logic, and then go that in circle. So usually, one or two cycles of this test-driven development is very healthy. Okay, if you're having to go through this more than twice, that means that you're doing something wrong. Okay, either the story is not clear, or you are not clear about the implementation, or you have not understood what the motivation is, or you are just not you're not able to understand how you want to write the code. Okay, at this point in time, maybe pair programming would be useful, but I'm not going to go into that detail. So Very quickly, the recap is, you write the failing test cases first, then make those test cases pass by writing the core of the business logic, and then you refactor code. Okay, I have come across seasoned agile developers, and they think that they're using test-driven development, but they are really not. Um because when I talk to them, they equate writing unit test cases to test-driven development. You may be writing unit test cases all you want. The important point here is that you have to write failing unit test cases first. Okay, just because the moment you get into the implementation first without thinking about the unit test cases, the quality of your code is going to go down right there. Okay, so keep this in mind. Those of you who are new to agile, new to development, or new to being agile coach, it's important that you inculcate this habit in your team. It takes a long time. It is a concept that is very easy to understand, but a very, very difficult habit to pick up. And once you pick it up, you will not go back. Okay, so that is about test driven development. Okay, I see that there are some questions already. Yes, in the green circle is when you are writing the business logic, correct? Yes, there are, I mean, all the technologies, I mean, all the big enterprise level technologies, J2E, .NET, Python, all these technologies, they come with a unit test case writing tool, and they're getting better every day. Very good question. At the web, in the web technologies, what is a unit? So you can there are you'll have to break down your implementation. Like, it's better to target them as tiers. Okay, so you have a service level, you have a server side tier. Okay, let's say J2E, your core Java code or J2E code that is sitting on the server that's going to execute on the server. Treat that as your layer, as your so you write JUnits for that. And in the front end, if you have JavaScript, you have unit test case suites for that too, so you can test your JavaScript code as well. Okay, also at the J2EE level, there are test suites like Cactus. It's called Cactus or Cacti, one of those two. And there are a couple of them that are available, which simulate the web request. Okay, so your web request and response becomes your input and output, and you can assert, you can match expected versus actual. Okay, good question. Okay. Okay, again, a very, very strong concept in Agile. Do not miss it. Agile development without test driven development is very hollow. Okay, let's talk about acceptance test driven development. So, there were a lot of questions in my last presentation around acceptance test driven development too. I got a lot of questions via email and on the chat here too. So, think of acceptance test driven development, or ATDD. Those of you who are planning to take the ACP exam from PMI, they will use these acronyms. Okay, so acceptance test driven development is ATDD, test driven development is TDD. They are very well known acronyms. The slide that I have here is kind of, if you're panning out of the test driven development from the coding or the development level out to the integration level. So imagine you have panned out at a higher level than that. So the same cycle would look like acceptance testament development. So we'll start with the top left corner. Okay, so you can see there's a customer who is interacting with product owners, who's interacting with QA engineers, who's interacting with dev engineers. This discussion is very important. Okay, so it is also possible that product owner is your internal customer. Okay, but it is best to engage the actual end user or persona. Um, so we're talking at a story level. Okay, so let's say you're discussing a story. So all these people, they come together, they understand what the story is expected to do. What is the motivation of the story? What is the description? What is the priority? What is the benefit it's going to give? Also, as a part of this discussion, you are refining the the acceptance the acceptance criteria. So those of you who have been attending my webinars regularly or watching them on YouTube, acceptance criteria is, very important. It's kind of a success criteria. It brings a new level of completeness to a story. Okay, which is why we love user stories so much, and which is also a distinguishing factor from use cases. Use cases do not ship with the success criteria. So your user story has an acceptance criteria, which is kind of, imagine that you are doing user acceptance testing and the customer is giving you your acceptance test cases at this time, at the time you're discussing the details. There are huge advantages here at this point itself because you're engaging customer. So you're hearing everything from customer, you're having conversation, you understand exactly what customer wants. You're validating assumptions, you're doing all sorts of good stuff there. Once that is done, the next step is Distal. Okay, so Distal is again an elaborate step in the sense that at this point in time, we are writing integration test cases or functional test cases. Not only that, I am a big fan of automation. So it is the best step in this whole cycle to automate your tests as well. Okay, most of the time you're using automation test suites which expect test data in some kind of a parameterized form or some kind of a format, whether it's spreadsheet or CSV or tab delimited. There are different formats that different tools use, and you may have your own custom tool for automation. So at this point in time, not only you're identifying your test cases by stretching out the acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria becomes your starting point for writing test plan and test cases. You are also automating them. Okay, automation goes a very, very long way. I cannot emphasize enough on how important automation, test case automation, or whole testing suite automation is for a product lifecycle, for an enterprise, and for competitiveness in the market. Okay, I'm going to take a separate session on um, automation altogether. I don't want to uh, harp on that topic right now, but in the distal step, it's the best time to do automation, test case automation. From this point on, you can see you have QA, and why do we have the? I'll just come back to distal again. Why do we have the product owner here? Is because the test cases that we write, they also have to be reviewed, and it is best to have product also review the test cases, or at least the test scenarios at a high level. Very good practice. Following that, we have the develop step. Okay, at this point in time, you can see both QA and dev are involved here. So this is when you are actually pounding on the story. So development engineer is creating the code, is writing the code using the test event cycle here, the same red, green, and purple cycle. So that's how the development engineer is writing the code. The test engineer or the QA engineer is deploying that code in an integration environment and checking if that it is working against the acceptance criteria. Okay, so there's a lot of churning going on. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of collaboration going on. It is not as if development engineer finishes the code, commits the code, and QA comes back after days or months together to start a QA cycle and find bugs and gives back to the developer. Okay, at this point in time, QA is not trying to find bugs; they're trying to prevent them. So there's a lot of churning that goes on between dev and QA, and test-driven development is at the heart of the whole development cycle. Okay, which is why I have left it here. Once once this develop part is complete, there is a demo part, okay, which is when the customer and the product owner come together again with QA and dev engineers. So those of you who are acclimated with Scrum, there is a concept of sprint review. So sprint review happens at the end of the sprint, end of the iteration. What it means is that you will finish all the stories and then demo or review that sprint. In this case, in acceptance testing and development, you are doing it even better. So as soon as the story is complete from the dev and QA standpoint, you have still not closed that story. Okay, remember that fact. So you have not closed that story yet until it is accepted by the customer. Okay, so think of it as like a project cycle, but just for that story. So you started with the discussion or the requirements of the user story, created test cases, did the development and QA, and now you're doing UAT, okay, user acceptance testing. Okay, so the user acceptance testing is the closest analogy I can think of in this demo. So when you're demoing, you are keeping your acceptance criteria. You're demoing against the acceptance criteria, like what was agreed, what you built, and this is how it is working. At this point in time, customer or product owner will have feedback or questions. Okay, so there's a lot of good discussion that is going on. Now, based on that feedback, it is possible that there was some noise in the communication before, or there were certain concept that was not clearly understood, or there was something that was identified later, or some assumptions were taken. At this point, those things will surface. So it will transition very quickly from demo to discussion again, and thereon you'll follow the same cycle. So it's possible that after the discussion you realize that you did not quite meet the scope, or did not quite meet the acceptance criteria that was needed, or there was worst case could be that there was an acceptance criteria that was totally missed. Okay, we call it scope creep. Acceptance criteria really defines a scope very crisply, and if there is an addition in the scope or reduction in the scope, most of the time there's an addition. If there's an addition in the scope, then it's called scope creep. So there are different ways of handling that, but I'm not going to go too deep into scope creep. The gist of uh, my point is that if once you have the discussion, you'll follow the whole cycle all the way to demo until the customer is completely satisfied. So at this point in time, you have you are good to close the story. So and remember, you are following the same cycle. What the key thing here is that as soon as you have the story, you are not deep diving into development right away. You are identifying the test cases that are needed, the integration test cases or the functional test cases first, which is going to be the core success criteria for your story. If you deep dive, if you skip this distal step and not write your test cases, there's a good chance that you will miss a lot of things. You will miss the whole understanding of the story. You may miss a lot of test cases that customer is going to expect you have completed before you even demo it to him. So keep in mind that this distal step is very important, and also it's the best time to do automation. Okay, any questions? Oh, I see there's another question on the test driven development. Yeah, looks like I've already answered that, so I'm just going to go back. Yes. So the green, yeah, the green circle is where you're writing your code. This is where you will write all your, the meat of the code, the business logic. But you'll have the test cases first, the failing test cases first. Okay. Uh, how is test driven development different than acceptance test driven? So yeah, so like I was saying, acceptance test driven development is at a higher level than test driven development, but it is following the same cycle. The concept is that you identify the test cases first, so that you know the exact scope. You have not missed analysis of any of the scenarios. Okay, customer, how to engage customer. Yeah, so this is a very good point. So usually there are agile contracts. So there's a concept of agile negotiation as well. So when we are when we decide that we are going to follow agile practices, okay, at that point in time the customer has to be on board as well. They have to understand that in order for them to get the most value out of what they're paying for, they will have to stay engaged. Okay, they'll have to work with the team, with the product owners very closely. Okay, so these are the certain things that have to be negotiated first. It should not come to as a surprise to customer, like, why are you discussing this story with me in this big group? It has to be very clear what are the practices we are going to follow. They will be involved in writing the success, or helping us write the success criteria for a story. And they will also be involved in giving us feedback at the time when we think that story is ready. And it is only going to give them most value, instead of they just giving up some documentation of a high level requirement and coming back after 6 months expecting all that would be done. So it's a very important thing to make sure that the customer engagement. And it is one of those of you who have been to agilemanifesto.org, that is the official agile website. One of the practice there says very clearly that the business people must work with the team daily on a regular basis. Okay, it is one of the very important agile practice. Without customers engagement, agile agile processes, they would just be meaningless. You want to get frequent feedback, and frequent and honest feedback from the customer, from the users who are actually going to use the system at as soon as possible, which is why we have all these cycles. Okay, for some reason I'm not seeing a lot of questions. Last time there were a lot of questions. Yes, in the Distal cycle. So question is, what is the role of product owner in the Distal cycle? So product owner is involved in so when we are writing test cases here, test plan, product owner may be involved in the review of that test plan and test cases, just to make sure that we have not missed out anything. Okay, and again I'll say, same thing one more time. This both these cycles, test driven development and acceptance test driven development, even more, they are very difficult habits to get used to. It is a different in the mindset from the traditional way of thinking. And at the end of it, whatever that you're delivering to the customer is going to be very high, superior quality code. Okay, so let me just quickly check if there is something more in the chat. Not really. Okay, so I believe most of you had gone through. I'm sorry, I'm repeating this presentation again, but my motivation was that there were a lot of things that were left unanswered last time. Okay, I see that there's another question. During the develop cycle, is the product owner involved in any way? Yes. Okay, good question. Let me, oh, something happened to my presentation. Okay. Yes. In the develop cycle, the involvement of the product owner is minimal. However, we have to keep in mind the development work, when you're doing development work, it does not necessarily only mean coding. Okay? Coding is just a part of it. Development work involves everything: coding, unit testing, code review, test case execution, building, deployment, uh, test report analysis. It is possible at the development stage. Sometimes we may have to interact with product owner to get some more clarity on things, on edge cases, fringe cases, negative cases. If there's any confusion about the scope, also when you have executed the tests, there could be some observations which may not be exactly negative test case results or test case failures. You'll have to analyze the test report, and at that time product owner may also be useful. And then another part of the question was, does it mimic Scrum in any ways? So Scrum is a bigger methodology. Acceptance test driven development is a practice that you can plug in your Scrum. Scrum doesn't clearly say that you have to follow acceptance test driven development. It also doesn't say that you have to follow test driven development, but it says that in loose terms. Okay, but those are those are the agile practices that you follow at the time while you're doing development. One thing I would say, which I said before, in Scrum, there is a concept of sprint demo or sprint review. So that whole demo, it's waiting until the end of the sprint. In acceptance test driven development, you are doing the demo as the story is ready, as the story is ready when you think it is ready. So it is, in my opinion, it is a little bit better because you're not waiting all the way to the end of the sprint. Good question. Okay, so let's. I see there are no more questions. So I'm just going to quickly let's go over some of the um, tips for doing better test-driven development. Okay, and then we'll look at some sample questions. The first tip is that do not assume too much. Okay, one of the biggest mistakes that we do in development cycle is that we assume things. And the worst thing is that QA assumes certain things, developers assume certain things, product owners assume certain things. The best way is, and you have to agree that there are assumptions that will be needed. There will be assumptions that are we have to take assumptions. Okay, when you assume, make sure that you validate those assumptions with the product owner or the customer or whoever is the subject matter expert. So don't just take assumptions without validating them. The second tip is automate, okay, which I've emphasized already in the Distal step. Try to automate as much as you can. It's going to be a big win when your product grows. You want to make sure that your rollout cycles are faster, and the only way they can become faster is when you have most of your test cases automated. Number three is engage customer more, okay, which we also talked about. So the whole cycle of acceptance testing and development, you can see there are two steps: discuss and demo, which require customer engagement. Just make sure that we don't miss that engagement. A demo without customer is not going to be as fruitful. Okay. The fourth point here is a demo environment. Okay, so this could be, sometimes this can be a problem. Like you would have to have a demo environment where customers can log in and they can see, or you can have, you know, a demo environment which has data that is realistic to the customer. So in order for you to do that, you'll have to maintain that environment. And we are not talking about just one story. There'll be hundreds of stories that you'll be implementing. So in all those stories, they'll have to be demoed. The and a demo environment, an added environment, is going to come as at a cost. But the benefits of doing the demo to the customer and taking feedback in time, or quick feedback, that benefit is going to outweigh the cost. So don't just shun demoing or acceptance test development cycle because you don't, you cannot afford a demo environment. Okay. And the fifth tip here is avoid too many iterations, and this goes for both test event development and acceptance test event development. If there are too many iterations that are happening, I'll just go back to the previous slide. So just like I said in test event development, if it is taking more than 2 cycles to close a story in acceptance test event development, that means that we are doing something seriously wrong. Either we are not understanding what customer wants, so there's a communication gap, or we are not doing the implementation right or testing right. So when you're starting your third cycle, just step back a little bit and see what you're doing wrong. There could be a bigger problem. Okay, I see there's another question. What should we do if customer is not ready to join calls? Okay, it's like I mentioned before, it's a question of negotiation with the customer. Does customer really want? Okay, my PowerPoint just crashed again. But I'll continue the commentary. Does customer really want to draw the most value out of what they are paying for, the whole development cycle that they are paying for? The only way they will get that is by being available, being accessible. If they are not accessible, then it is going to be an Herculean task for any team to meet the expectation, because there'll always be gap. All we are trying to do here is reduce noise, remove any gaps, remove any uh, you know remove any invalid assumptions. And the only way we could get that done is by engaging customer. And if they're not ready to join calls, just set that expectation right. Let them know that the quality of the software is going to suffer. And most of the time the customers are very reasonable. There are tough customers, but they like to work objectively. They like numbers. They like to see demos. In my experience, most, like 9 out of 10 times, customers are really happy to see things. In fact, they ask to be able to see things ahead of time, and that's exactly what we are giving them. Okay, so let's. I think there are no more questions now. We have 5 more minutes, so let's quickly look at 3 questions. I have shown these questions before, but it's not still. It's going to be a good exercise. So just read the question yourself and send me your answer privately in the questions of the chat box. Excellent. The correct answer is D. You got it right. All of the above: rich and rapid feedback, informed decision making, active knowledge sharing, all of them, they are advantages of osmotic communication. Okay, next question. Okay, great. Most of you are getting it right too. Very good. I see a few of wrong answers, but the correct answer is D. Which of the following is not a part of test driven development? Writing passing unit test cases after writing code is not a part of test driven development. We have to write the failing unit test cases first. Okay. And one last question. Okay, great. Most of you got this one right too. The correct answer is B. At the time of Distal, it's the best time to write, um, best time to automate test cases. Okay, so before I adjourn, let me quickly make sure that I answered all the questions. Excellent. So thank you all for joining. Hopefully, it was useful. And I look forward to seeing you 2 weeks from today. It's going to be early in November, but exactly 2 weeks. Next Friday, there's going to be no webinar, but the Friday after that, there's going to be a free webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye bye.